November 2024. The following members are present: Councillors Alec Allison, Ralph Barker, Arch Buchanan, Ross Clark, Jerry Convery, Margaret Cowie, Maureen Devlin, Colin Dewar, Mary Donnelly. We have apologies from Councillors Monique Ekway, Joe Fagan and Alistair Fulton. Councillor Julia Mars is attending as a substitute for Councillor Fulton. Councillor Shalene Handyboat is present. Councillor Graham Horn is not present. Councillors Cal Johnson Dempsey and Ross Lambie are present. Councillor Martin Lennon is not present. The following members are present: Councillors Leslie MacDonald, David McLachlan, Richard Nelson, Norman Ray, John Ross, Graham Scott, David Shearer, Helen Toner, and we have apologies from Councillor David Watson. Thank you, and I'll pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you very much, Stuart. We'll go into today's agenda. Agenda item number 1, please. Any declarations of interest? If there are no declarations of interest, agenda item number 2 then is minutes of the previous meeting. These are submitted for approval as a correct record. These are on pages 5 to 10. I will move as these as a correct minute.
I'll second it, Chair.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is an item for noting. It's the adopted South Lanarkshire Council Scheme of Delegation. I will move these as to be noted.
I'll second them.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is also an item for noting. These are planning appeal decisions from April 2024 to September 2024. I will move these to be noted.
I'll second them.
Thank you. We'll move into agenda item number 5, please. It's application P230886, and these are pages 29 to 42 in your pack. And this is the installation of a battery storage system facility with associated infrastructure. And I'll ask Fraser to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a site within the Greenbelt extending to some 1.7 hectares and which currently forms part of an agricultural holding. And the application seeks consent for the construction of a battery energy storage system which amounts to some 28 separate structures which would be accessed via a new entrance road off Westburn Road. 3 public objections and an objection from Scottish Gas Networks were received in relation to the proposals, and these are summarised in the report to members, but in this instance it is considered that the consideration of the proposals against the relevant national and local development planning policies are the defining issues. In this respect, the local and national policies in relation to the Greenbelt are of significance, and in particular the requirement for all new development to identify a specific locational need. And in this respect, given that the closest grid connection to the site is some 1.7 kilometres away, this need has not been proven. Local and national planning policies do support the provision of essential infrastructure in locations that connect to existing facilities, but in this instance, this connection has not been demonstrated, and it is also considered that the limited economic and employment benefits of this proposal would not provide sufficient justification to recommend approval for this development in the Greenbelt. Picking on some of the details of the proposals, which would also lead to a recommendation of refusal, paragraphs 10.15 to 10.17 outline the design and amenity objections to this development, while paragraph 10.18 raises issues that exist in relation to drainage. Therefore, while noting that battery energy storage facilities are one element of the drive towards net zero, it is considered that in relation to this site at Westburn Road, the applicant has not provided sufficient justification to locate this development within the Greenbelt, and for the reasons set out on pages 38 and 39, it is recommended that planning consent should be refused.
Thank you very much, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a note on 10.4, it mentions there would be a number of other potential sites within a similar distance which would not necessitate development within the Greenbelt. Do we know if the applicant has considered or assessed any alternative sites and decided against them, or have they just not been considered?
In terms of sites within the group, we are currently dealing with a number of applications for battery energy storage facilities. Whether or not the applicants consider these as options is not we're not absolutely certain on that. But what we are aware of is that a number of sites that were receiving interest, but a number of planning applications we're having to deal with. These are current ones that have been through the assessment process, and that's why we're in a position to bring these to committee. But we are aware that there's a big demand for this form of development within South Lanarkshire and across the rest of the country that we would also mention as well. So that's why we're feeling as if that we have these applications that we can bring to the committee just now to make a decision on them.
Thank you, Fraser. Any further questions or comments? If there are no further questions or comments, I will then move the recommendation, which is to refuse.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Thank you. We will then move on to agenda item number 6, please. This is application P231033, pages 43 to 56. It's installation of a battery energy storage facility at East Kilbride in South Lanarkshire. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application also seeks consent for a battery energy storage system, and it's on a Greenbelt site just under a kilometre north of East Kilbride. This proposal relates to some 18 structures and the formation of an enclosed compound and associated equipment, and it is noted that a BES is currently under construction some 102 metres away, closer to a nearby substation. The applicant has advised that an underground connection would link to this substation, and while this is not a determining factor in the assessment of the application, it is noted that there is no formal agreement in place to establish this connection. Details of consultation responses and the representation submitted are set out in sections 6 and 7 of the report to members. But as with the previous application, it is considered that the determining issue with this application are the assessment against national and local planning policies. In this respect, it is considered that the applicant has not demonstrated that there is a specific locational need to develop at this location. And this conclusion has been given further credence by the fact that a BES facility is already under construction in this area that was able to demonstrate its acceptability in that it was immediately adjacent to a substation. Issues around design and layout are raised in section 10 of the report to members, and in paragraph 10.18, it is noted that there are residential properties in close proximity to this application site, and in this context, the assessment of the proposals did not provide sufficient comfort on issues such as noise, lighting, and how it would integrate with the surrounding area. Therefore, with the additional issues around drainage and the objection from Scottish Gas Networks, it is considered that this proposal as submitted does not comply with local or national planning policies, and for the 12 reasons set out on pages 52 and 53, it is recommended that the application should be refused.
Thank you. Can I open for any questions or comments, please? If you could please indicate now. If there are no questions or comments, I will then happy to refuse as per the recommendation.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 7 then is application P240307. These are pages 57 to 68. Again, it's installation of a battery storage, Crowland Highway, East Kilbride. And I'll ask Fraser to present.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a site that is also located in the Greenbelt between East Kilbride and Hamilton, and it seeks consent for a 22.8 megawatt battery energy storage system involving some 15 structures that would be accessed off a private road that leads to the Rigmuir landfill restoration site. Consultation responses are set out in section 6 of the report, and an assessment of the proposals is provided in section 10. In this respect, it is noted that policies 1 and 2 of the National Planning Framework do seek to encourage uses that address the impacts of climate change, while Policy 18 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan provides a local policy context that is favourable for renewable energy proposals. However, national and local planning policies are not set as a hierarchy of policies, but instead it is recognised that the assessment of planning applications needs to be made on the development plan as a whole. And in this context, the determining factor in this application relates to the fact that it seeks to introduce a use within the designated Greenbelt that is unacceptable on a number of development planning considerations as set across section 10 of the report presented to members. The applicant's agent has been in the recent days submitted summary information to elected members in support of the application, but in this respect it is not considered that any new issues or new considerations have been brought to our attention that would lead me to change the recommendation given to members. In summary, It is recognised that battery storage systems are an emerging technology, and they are a land use that will have an ongoing role in the drive to ensure that there is a reliable and steady supply of electricity onto the national grid. In this respect, it is noted, though, that it is a land use that will need to be catered for in future iterations of the development plan, and for which additional national guidance would be welcomed. However, in this instance, given that the site is located within the Greenbelt and does not take advantage of existing energy infrastructure or potential connections, it is considered that the integrity of the Greenbelt designation should not be undermined, and for the reasons set out on pages 65 and 66, it is recommended that application P240307 should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I will open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor David Shearer.
Chair, to ask a general question of Fraser. Fraser mentioned needing further guidance in the next iteration of the local plan. I was wanting to ask Fraser, would that include guiding any developments to what might be deemed more appropriate sites away from residential areas, taking into consideration the health and safety angles that come from some of these battery storage places? I recognise that, yes, we have to have them as part of our future energy, but I think we have to be careful about where we locate them and how this is handled going forward. I was just wondering if Fraser could lay out some of the criteria for sites that we would deem to be more appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Fraser?
Yeah, no, yes, we will be looking to set criteria in the local development plan. We're also engaging at local government level with the Scottish Government just now, looking for more national guidance and a wee bit more information that would allow us to inform our decision-making process. As it stands just now, the assessment of these proposals is it runs contrary to the Greenbelt designation. But there may be sites within the Greenbelt that could be appropriate. There may be sites that link to infrastructure that could be appropriate. The three that we had presented today, we did not consider to be appropriate. But I think there'll be various considerations that I think we would need to take on board through our own local plan policy considerations. We'd want to bring these proposals back to you as members so that then it can inform your decision-making process as well. Early in the new year, we'll be looking for a kind of call from ideas from across all the housing development sector, the industry, the energy development sector, commercial energy sector. That's possibly a way where the industry can engage with us and try and suggest the locations that might be appropriate. But as it stands just now, as I mentioned to Councillor Clark earlier on, we have a number of individual applications that we're dealing with just now that the context, the development within our existing policies are such that it only leads us to recommendations for refusal on these matters. But moving forward, it may be something that we'll have to refine our existing local but also national planning policies so that we can take consideration of this new and emerging use.
Thank you, Fraser. Is there any further questions or comments? Councillor Allison.
Thanks, Chair. My first point was very much what Councillor Shearer brought up. You also, a couple of other things you highlighted. First of all, you were looking for further guidance from Scottish Government. Surely we should take a positive line from that and decide what is best for us locally rather than being imposed on us, and therefore having clearer guidelines ourselves as to what we would wish to do in these cases would be very important. Second point is, you've mentioned the fact that these are all in the green belt. I seem to think now the green belt extends from the last house to the next house it finds and covers the whole rural area, because I think the terminology is green belt and rural area quite often used. And I am not convinced that we have sufficiently defined what we're calling green belt, because I have seen some of the applicants moving away from this one specifically. Green belt being used in very rural areas which could not be covered. So again, I think that needs to be clarified as to exactly what we're doing there, because a lot of money will be invested in these projects that are now can't go forward. And if we don't know what we're doing, how do they know what to do and where to apply? So I think we need to be much clearer in what we're doing.
The Greenbelt is defined in the adopted local development plan. There are policies that cover the Greenbelt and rural area, and we need to apply them consistently across the board. But there is a defined boundary for the Greenbelt within South Lanarkshire. In terms of the Scottish Government imposing policies onto us, no, that's not the consideration on this, but it would be good to get a bit of, it's a bit more of a steer in terms of Scottish Government, in terms of their policies, and in terms of who makes the decision within South Lanarkshire, it's the Planning Committee. The Planning Committee we will make the decision that we feel are appropriate for South Lanarkshire, and we would always stress that that's the case. I think the guidance we're looking from the Scottish Government is just this is a new and emerging technology that actually within the national policy is a wee bit too permissive. And I think what we recognise, and when you then put the local planning policy onto that, is that it could raise potential issues. So we are implementing our local planning policy within the context of the National Development Plan. And again, it's taking this factor I'm saying here, it's not a hierarchy of policies where one trumps the other. It's across the whole development plan policy context. The uses in these locations is not acceptable. And I think it's guidance we're looking for Scottish Government as opposed to them, say, imposing measures onto us, because again, we'll make the decisions on this, and I think members would always be keen that that is the case.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If there are no further questions or comments, the recommendation is to refuse. I will refuse.
I'll second it, Chair.
All agreed? Thank you. We'll then move on to agenda item number 8, please. This is application P240529, pages 69 to 84. This is erection of 25 dwelling houses, associated access roads, nosebund with fence, suds pond, open space and landscaping, and that's at Brockettsbrae and Lesmahago. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a site that is located within the identified settlement boundary of Brockettsbrae, and it seeks consent for the erection of 25 dwellings as a variation to a consent that was approved in February 2024 after a Section 75 agreement had been concluded. There are no objections from statutory consultees, but 10 letters of objection were submitted, and these are on the Council Planning Portal and are summarised in Section 6 of the report. Notwithstanding this, it is considered that the proposal is acceptable in that it is located in an existing settlement, and the details of the proposal are acceptable and do not raise amenity, transportation or design issues that would bring it into conflict with the relevant development planning policies. Therefore, it is considered that subject to the conditions set out across pages 86 to 90, and the successful conclusion of a new Section 75 agreement, the heads of terms for which are set out on page 82 of the report, that the planning consent should be issued for the erection of 25 dwellings at the junction of Eastwood Road and Brockettsbrae Road.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Barker.
Thanks, is that me on? Right, thanks, Chair. Just advice. I appreciate, there's been previous consent. Just that what's been brought to this meeting is just a site plan, and yet we're talking about conditions. So all we have is an outlined site plan for full planning consent. I just wonder if you could comment on that, please.
The plan that is presented as part of the committee papers is just a location plan. And that's what goes out with all the committee items. All the information in relation to this application has been available on the council portal, and the members will then acquaint themselves with the details of the site and with the details of the proposal itself, and that will then inform the recommendation and the decision that they will make on the planning application. So the report here is a summary of the information with a location plan for the site. But members will have been fully appraised themselves for the details of the proposal, and that allows them to make the recommendation.
Right. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Fraser.
Councillor Lambie, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. This site's been rumbling on for quite a long time now. I mean, you go back through the previous applications, you'll get to some of the original documents that were submitted in support of it. One of them is that noise impact of the motorway next door, and that report's quite old now. I think it's almost 10 years old. I might be wrong. And there is a traffic monitoring point on the M74 not too far away from the site, and it shows the traffic's actually gone up about 40-odd%. So I'm just wondering, you know, when it's kind of like a reapplication, whether the justifying documents need to be updated, just because, I mean, we need to make sure the residents who do move there have a good quality of life next to such a busy transport asset. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that is a consideration, and there are 1 to 4 conditions that are associated in terms of noise, potential impact from the road that was nearby. There wasn't an objection that came in from environmental services regardless, but those conditions will need to be updated in order to purify those conditions, and that should then protect the amenity of the residents moving in. The amenity of the residents moving in is very much a consideration of the, those that are, the issue is, for the existing communities and the existing residents, so that should hopefully then provide sufficient assurance for the people that are living in these properties.
Supplementary, if that's okay, Chair. Just like I said, this site's been around for a while with various iterations, more or less the same. At what point do we take it out of the settlement boundary if it's never going to be delivered? I'm just thinking there's a lot of objections, and it does cause a lot of stress for the neighbours, you know, to have to continually object to repeat applications. And I just wonder, a bit of guidance on that, you know, do we, if it's never actually being built out, one must assume it's not viable to be built out. Do we withdraw that? Thanks.
Yeah, there are a number of considerations in terms of the sites that haven't been dealt out and are no longer viable, and if the conditions can't be met, then on instances like that we can look to revise the settlement boundary. In this instance, the applicant has, the site has changed hands in terms of ownership. The applicant has come in, indicating that they're keen to move forward. We can't insist of that with the applicant. They're moving forward, but I would like, I've got the sense in terms of with this one, they are keen to move forward on it. The conditions are all, they're set there to ensure that we get a quality of development that fits in with the existing settlement boundary, as well as preserves amenity of the residents that are moving forward. But this and a number of sites, there are a number of sites that I suppose that are identified for residential development within the local plan just now, and through that next iteration of the plan, we may have to consider how viable they are. That's again, I touched on this call for ideas proposal that's coming forward. There are sites that may come out because they aren't viable. We want to make sure we've got an effective housing land supply that meets the needs of communities. This site has been identified by a developer who is indicating that they want to develop it, and it complies with policy. So that's why it's got the recommendation to members.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, the recommendation is to grant subject to conditions. I will move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
All agreed. Agenda item number 9 is application P240549, pages 85 to 92. And this is section 42 application for deletion of condition 2 of planning consent, which is in Blair Road and Crisford. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks to remove a condition that restricts the occupancy of a detached dwelling that was approved in 2012, with the limitation that its occupation was directly linked to the associated equine livery business. The equine business was approved in 2007, and as it expanded, consent was granted for a residential caravan and then a dwelling, which all was in line with the relevant planning policies. However, in seeking to remove this condition, it is considered that this brings the application into conflict with a number of local and national planning policies, as it effectively seeks to introduce a dwelling that is not linked to a rural business. It is also noted that if the equestrian business was sold off separately, then it is likely that the business would require on-site accommodation to function. As such, it is considered that the application to remove the condition attached to application CL12-104 does not conform to the relevant local and national planning policy considerations, and for the reasons set out on pages 89 and 90 should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. Any questions or comments, please? If there are no questions or comments, Councillor Shearer.
Can I just ask, is the equine business still in operation at this moment in time?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
No further questions or comments. The recommendation then is to refuse. I will move the recommendation.
I'll second it, Chair.
All agreed. Agenda item number 10, please, is application P240598. These are pages 93 to 102. This is the formation of a house plot, planning permission in principle, at a plot of land at Carnwath Mill Farmhouse, Spittal Road in Carnwath. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to land that is returned to a semi-natural state and is surrounded to the west, east and south with agricultural land, and to the north an access road that leads to a grouping of buildings primarily comprising of converted structures centred around the former Carnwath Mill. The applicant seeks consent for a two-storey dwelling, and following publicity, 5 letters of objection and 15 of support were submitted, and the details of these are available to view on the Council portal and are summarised in Section 7. The determining issue in relation to this application was its assessment within the context of the local and national planning policies, and in this respect, as set out in Section 10 of the report, the proposed dwelling and the circumstances provided by the applicant as described in paragraphs 10.5 and 10.6 mean that the proposal does not comply with the terms of Policy 4 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan, and in turn is also contrary to policies GBRA 8, GBRA 9 and SLLDP 2. The proposals are also contrary to a number of policies within the National Planning Framework, and therefore, for the reasons set out in Section 11 of the report that has been presented to members, it is recommended that application P240598 should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Allison.
Being aware of the site, I mean, I would go further. It is not just read. What was the word you used? No, it's actually quite poor quality ground now. It's left. It's basically scrub. Is it somewhere you would like to develop it? If it had been in a town, you would have called it a brownfield site, I think, and it is right next to other developments. Where I'm concerned about it and would agree with you is that with a road going through the site, with others having access over it, it does raise other issues, and I would think that they would need to be addressed before we could consider that site. But I would certainly think it's a suitable site if these problems with the access that's required were addressed.
Fraser?
Yeah, I think that's a consideration, Councillor, but not necessarily a determining factor with this application. I think that there is a right of access to other properties. The ownership or the access to the right of access is a private matter that the two owners there would need to address, but there are a number of other factors that would lead to the recommendation for refusal on this application as presented.
Thank you, Fraser. Any further questions or comments, please? If there are no further questions or comments, then the recommendation is to refuse. I will go with the recommendation.
I'll second it.
All agreed. Agenda item number 11, application P240644. These are on pages 103 to 112. That's the erection of a dwelling house, Gilfoot Nursery, Crisford. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to the site of a former agricultural nursery that now accommodates a small residential development serving the application site and 4 other properties. The applicant is seeking consent for a 2-storey property, and while this in itself is a form of development that would be contrary to the provisions of the adopted local development plan, it is noted that there is an existing consent on this site and that this application only seeks to amend the design. The application was subject to 16 letters of objection, but as set out in the assessment in Section 10 of the report to members, it is considered that the details of the design and the impact on amenity and the local environment are acceptable. So therefore, while noting that a development in the Greenbelt of this nature does not comply with local and national Greenbelt policies, it is considered that given that there is an extant consent for this site, that this application should be approved as a departure from the development plan, subject to the conditions on pages 108 and 109.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Lambie.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. When they make this application for amendment, does that essentially restart their clock, you know, and when they have to actually build it out? In other words, does it trigger another 3 years permission? Yes, so it's okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, please? If there are no further questions or comments, the recommendation then is to grant subject to conditions. I will move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
All agreed. Thank you. Application number, agenda item number 12 then is application P240729. These are pages 113 to 122. It's a subdivision of garden ground and erection of 1.5-storey dwelling house with associated works at Little Drips Cottage and Thornton Hall. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a site that is located in the Greenbelt between Thornton Hall and Eaglesham, and it seeks consent for the erection of a 1.5-storey dwelling within the grounds of the existing Little Drips Cottage. Planning permission was refused earlier in 2024 for a similar proposal, and following the assessment of this new application, it is considered that the same decision is appropriate. The proposed development does not comply with the requirements of South Lanarkshire's adopted Greenbelt policies, and furthermore runs contrary to the relevant policies in the National Planning Framework. It is noted that Drips Cottage has a fairly significant curtilage without buildings, and it may be the case that the applicant may want to consider a revised proposal that would provide for independent living, but involve a scale of development that is more in keeping with the Greenbelt policies and would retain a sufficient level of amenity space. But as submitted, this application is unacceptable and not compliant with planning policy, and as such, for the reasons set out in section 11, should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Graham Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Fraser for his report. Can I point members towards obviously 10.6 in the papers and 10.15A? There's reference to the applicant wanting to build this house for health reasons, and I believe that a health report submission was put in by the doctors of the applicant in relation to this. Was the Ms. Friel, obviously the daughter, has sent the medical report around members of the committee, and obviously I had a look at it. What importance was given to the medical report by the planning officers? Because obviously we're not going to discuss anyone's individual ailments at committee, but they seem fairly serious, and I'm led to believe that the whole idea of the house next door is to make it more adaptable to aids and adaptations, and that the daughter who is looking after the father would move into the house next door. And I'm led to believe, and I know, I checked it, that even the NPF 4 has an age in place caveat. The humanity, even NPF 4 has some humanity in it. Why was the medical report discounted by planning officers, if I can ask that question?
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I'll ask Fraser to come in.
No medical report was submitted as part of the planning application, Councillor Scott. I think there may have been further communication with members. The suggestion that had been provided in terms of the planning application that it was for a property for independent living that potentially the applicant was moving into to allow the daughter to move into the existing property, but that was a submission. Further medical assessment would be taken into consideration, but what I would say with this one is this is quite a significant size of proposal. We have approved accommodation in the past which is ancillary to the main use. This is quite a significant proposal within the grounds of an existing property, neither of whom would have an adequate level of open space and privacy and amenity as a result of the development. We have, as I say, in the past actually had discussions with applicants about extensions to properties, reusing outbuildings so that they can then provide that degree of independent living, and our policies do accommodate that. What we have just now, though, is a proposal for two properties, probably of a similar kind of size. It runs contrary to our Greenbelt policies, and that's what leads us to the recommendation that was submitted here. But I think a medical report may have been something that followed, may have been issued to members. I'm not aware of that, but it wasn't taken into consideration through this application.
Just before I bring Councillor Scott back in, Fraser, can I just ask if the applicant came back in with a further proposal to extend the current property, would that be an option for the applicant rather than building a bigger property next to it?
Usual caveat answer around that, Chair, is every application is treated on its own merits, but I would say the principle of ancillary accommodation within an existing plot is something that could be acceptable. I don't think this proposal, as suggested, would be considered as being ancillary. It would be, it'd be a separate unit. As I say, the garden ground and amenity space that would be remaining on the back of that would also bring it into conflict with existing policies. But yes, that's something that we could discuss, and we have done that with applicants in the past. There's been decisions that have been made by this committee that then the applicants have gone back in and made revised proposals, and we've been amenable to those discussions. But as presented, and that's what we have to take in terms of what we go to members, is the information that's presented to us and the details that are presented, then it leads us to this recommendation for refusal.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll bring in Councillor Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a supplementary in relation to what Fraser has said. Am I right, Fraser, in saying that you're saying that you never got a submission from the general practice of the applicant about this item?
Fraser?
Yeah, that is the case. Yeah, we didn't receive any sort of medical report in and around this. But what I would also read, even with that, I think in terms of the recommendation would be the same as well in terms of the size and scale of the development. And as I say, we are open to having discussions about probably be a more modest extension or an ancillary unit. It would be ancillary to that main residential use.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Donnelly, please.
Thanks, Chair. So you would be acceptable. It would be acceptable then, Fraser, to defer this, to have further discussions with the people putting this proposal forward in a humane way, to try and come back with another application that would meet the requirements of planning.
Councillor Donnelly, no, that's not what Fraser said. What Fraser said is we take this one in its own merits. What my question was there a possibility? So we have to determine this application. It's not for to defer it. That would be up to the applicant if they wanted to come in. I was just trying to ascertain whether there was something we could do. So that's not what we're trying to do here. We have to take this one, we have to determine this one, and it's then for the applicant if they wish to come back in. What Fraser was saying is the door is always open. He's not saying it's a total yes, but the door's open for that conversation to be had. Is there any further questions or comments, please? If there are no further questions or comments, then the recommendation is to refuse. I will move that recommendation.
I'll second it, Chair.
All agreed? Thank you. We'll then move on to application, agenda item number 13, which is application P240851. These are on pages 123 to 134. This is erection of 24 affordable apartments for social rent with car parking and associated works at Carnegie Hill, East Kilbride. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application has been submitted on behalf of East Kilbride Housing Association. And the application is actually a resubmission of an earlier proposal that was withdrawn. And through positive engagement with the planning service as well as other council services, it is considered that this proposal is now consistent with the provisions of the local development plan. It is noted that 16 letters of objection were submitted, but the issues raised are summarised in section 7, and on the whole, it is considered that proposed development within an existing community, and which does not raise issues in terms of layout, impact or amenity, and other environmental considerations is acceptable. And therefore, subject to the imposition of the 17 conditions in the report to members, it is recommended that application P240851 should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. If there are no questions or comments, the recommendation then is to grant subject to conditions. I will move that recommendation.
I'll second it, Chair.
All agreed. Thank you. Agenda item number 14 is there are no items of urgent business. I will then close today's meeting. Thank you for attendance this morning and wish you an enjoyable day. Thank you.
Bye, folks.